Commander Jake Morrison stood in the communications center of Earth Defense Station Alpha, watching the green lights flash across his console. The night shift was usually quiet, but tonight something was different. A signal was coming through, the deep space array, and it was not from any human colony. Jake had been monitoring space communications for 12 years. He knew the difference between solar interference, equipment failure, and real signals. This was real. The pattern was too complex to be natural, too organized to be random noise. Someone was trying to talk to Earth. He called Dr. Lisa Hamilton from her laboratory 3 levels down. Lisa was Earth's best expert on alien languages and communication. She had spent years studying the few alien signals Earth had received before, but those had been simple mathematical sequences. This was something else entirely. Lisa arrived 20 minutes later, her brown hair tied back and her lab coat still covered in coffee stains. She looked at the data streaming across Jake's monitors, and her eyes went wide. "Jake, this is not just a signal. This is a message. Someone is talking to us in real time." Jake pointed to the frequency analysis. "It started 3 hours ago. The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 system, about 1/200 light-years away, but that's impossible. Even light takes 12 centuries to travel that distance." Lisa sat down at the decoding station and began running the signal through her translation programs. They must be using some kind of faster-than-light communication. The signal is repeating every 47 minutes, but each repetition has small changes. They're trying different approaches to make us understand. For the next 6 hours, Lisa worked to decode the alien message. Jake watched as she filled 3 whiteboards with symbols, mathematical equations, and linguistic patterns. Other technicians gathered around, bringing coffee and sharing theories. Word spread through the station that something big was happening. Captain Ryan Torres arrived at dawn. He was the head of Earth's new Interstellar Defense Corps, a military unit created just 2 years earlier, when Earth's deep space telescopes detected signs of alien civilizations. Ryan was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth and understood the importance of being prepared for anything. "What do we have?" Ryan asked, looking at the data covering Lisa's workstation. Lisa turned to face him, her expression grave. "Captain, we have first contact and they're asking for help." She pointed to her translation on the main screen. The message was written in simple English, translated from the alien mathematical language. "People of the 3rd planet of the yellow star. We are the Zephyrian coalition of the Kepler 442 system. We know you as the species that survived the Death World. We need your help. Our worlds are dying. The Vortan Empire destroys everything we have built. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight. But we have heard stories of your people. You survived on a world of storms and fire and ice. You fought each other for millions of years and became strong. Please help us. We offer our knowledge of medicine and star travel in exchange for protection. Time is running out. Please answer." The communication center fell silent. Everyone stared at the message, reading it again and again. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Aliens were real. They knew about Earth, and they were asking humans to fight a war in space. Ryan read the message 3 times before speaking. "Dr. Hamilton, how certain are you about this translation?" "Very certain, Captain. They're using mathematical concepts that are universal. They've also included star charts showing their location and the position of Earth. They know exactly where we are and what we are." Jake pulled up the astronomical data. "Sir, the Kepler 442 system has 3 planets in the habitable zone. Our telescopes detected signs of possible life there 15 years ago, but we never imagined it was an advanced civilization." Ryan studied the star charts. "They say they're being attacked by something called the Vortan Empire. Do we know anything about these Vorthans?" Lisa shook her head. "Nothing. But the Zephyrians describe them as an empire, which suggests they control multiple star systems. If they're attacking the Zephyrians, they must have interstellar travel capabilities. And they're asking us to fight them," Ryan said quietly. "A species we've never met wants us to go to war against another species we've never met, in a part of space we've never visited." Jake looked at the message again. "Captain, they called Earth a death world. They said we survived storms and fire and ice. They know about our history of warfare. They're specifically asking for our help because they think we're good at fighting." Lisa added, "The Zephyrians describe themselves as non-warriors. They say they don't know how to fight. They're calling us because they believe humans are natural soldiers." Ryan was quiet for several minutes, studying the star charts and reading the message again. Finally, he turned to Jake. "Commander, send this information to Admiral Susan Blake, immediately. Mark it as Priority 1. And get me a direct communication link to Earth Command." Jake began transmitting the data to Earth's military headquarters. Within minutes, his console showed incoming priority messages from governments around the world. The news was spreading fast. Lisa continued working on the alien message, trying to extract more information. "Captain, there's something else. The signal is getting weaker. I think they're running out of power or their equipment is being damaged. This might be their last attempt to contact us." Ryan nodded grimly. "Then we need to make a decision quickly. Either we ignore this and let whatever happens happen, or we get involved in an interstellar war." Jake looked at the star chart showing the vast distance to the Kepler 442 system. "Sir, even if we decide to help them, how would we get there? Our fastest ships would take thousands of years to reach their system." "That's a problem for the engineers," Ryan said. "Our job is to decide if we should try to help them at all." The communications center buzzed with activity as more personnel arrived and began analyzing the alien message. Jake watched Ryan study the data, knowing that the captain was making one of the most important decisions in human history. Outside the station's windows, Earth turned slowly in space, peaceful and blue. But Jake knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and someone out there thought humans were the kind of people you called when you needed someone killed. 3 weeks after receiving the alien message, the starship UES Resilience dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Captain Ryan Torres stood on the bridge, looking at the main screen that showed 3 blue-green planets orbiting a yellow star much like Earth's sun. The journey had taken longer than expected. Earth scientists had worked day and night to modify an experimental drive system, combining human engineering with mathematical principles extracted from the Zephyrian message. Dr. Lisa Hamilton had spent the entire trip studying every detail of alien communication, preparing for humanity's first face-to-face meeting with another intelligent species. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Communications Officer Lieutenant Mike Chen from his station. "It's the same mathematical pattern we saw in the original message, but much stronger now." Ryan nodded to Lisa, who moved to the communication console. She had learned to recognize the basic patterns of Zephyrian language during the flight. The translation computer she had built was primitive, but it worked well enough for simple conversations. "They're welcoming us to their system," Lisa said, reading the translated text. "They want to guide us to their homeworld. They're sending navigation data now." The main screen changed to show a detailed map of the solar system. The third planet was marked with complex symbols that the computer translated as meeting place and safety and gratitude. Ryan turned to his tactical officer, Sergeant Danny Murphy. "What's our defensive status?" Murphy was a short, stocky man who had served in Earth's Special Forces for 15 years. He knew more about combat in difficult conditions than anyone else on the ship. "All weapon systems are ready, Captain. Shield generators are at full power, but honestly, sir, we have no idea what we're going up against." The Resilience moved toward the third planet, following the navigation signals sent by the Zephyrians. As they got closer, the crew could see that this was not a world like Earth. Instead of brown and green continents, the planet's surface sparkled with what looked like crystal formations. Cities appeared to be built from some kind of translucent material that caught and reflected sunlight in beautiful patterns. "My God," whispered Lisa. "Look at those structures. They're not just buildings. They're works of art." The ship entered orbit around the planet, and Ryan gave the order to prepare for first contact. He selected a small team for the initial meeting. Himself, Dr. Hamilton, Sergeant Murphy, and 2 Marines, Corporals Amy Foster and Pete Jackson. They would take a shuttle down to the surface while the Resilience remained in orbit, ready to provide support if needed. The shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by crystal trees that seemed to grow like plants, but were made of some kind of living mineral. As the humans stepped out of their ship, they saw the first Zephyrians approaching. The aliens were tall and thin, almost twice the height of humans, with pale blue skin that glowed softly in the sunlight. They moved with flowing, graceful motions that reminded Lisa of dancers. Their faces were elongated and delicate, with large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They wore robes made of material that shifted colors as they moved. The lead Zephyrian approached slowly, making musical sounds that the translation device rendered as words. "Welcome, warriors of the Death World. I am Elder Catharai, speaker, for our people. We thank you for answering our call for help." Ryan stepped forward, trying to appear confident despite his amazement at seeing a real alien. "I am Captain Ryan Torres of Earth. We received your message and came as quickly as we could. Tell us about your situation." Elder Catharai gestured, with long, delicate fingers toward the crystal city. "Come. We will show you what the Vorthans have done to our people." The humans followed the Zephyrians into their city. The buildings were even more impressive up close, with walls that seemed to be grown rather than built. Everything was smooth and curved, with no sharp edges or harsh angles. The architecture was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. As they walked, Lisa noticed that the Zephyrians moved very carefully, as if they were afraid of breaking something. They spoke in soft, musical tones and seemed to communicate as much through changes in their skin color as through words. "Elder Catharai," Lisa said, "your people seem very different from humans. Can you tell us about your society?" The alien's skin shifted to deeper blue patterns. "We are beings of contemplation and creation. For 50,000 of your years we have lived in peace. We create art, study the stars, and heal those who are injured or sick. We have never known violence or war." Sergeant Murphy frowned. "Never? You've never had any conflicts at all? Conflict is resolved through meditation and discussion. We cannot understand the concept of deliberately harming another being. Physical pain is very intense for us. We cannot bear to cause suffering." They reached a large building in the center of the city. Inside, the walls were covered with images that seemed to move and change. Elder Catharai touched one wall, and the images began showing scenes of space battles. "These are recordings from our outer colonies," the Elder explained. 6 of your months ago, the Vorthan Empire arrived at our border worlds. They did not try to communicate. They simply began taking our people. The images showed alien ships that looked like living creatures, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed like heartbeats. These ships attacked Zephyrian installations with weapons that fired bright green energy, but instead of destroying everything, the Vorthan ships captured Zephyrians alive, loading them into cargo holds like prisoners. "They don't kill your people?" Ryan asked. Elder Catharai's skin turned dark purple. "Worse, our scouts report that they are using our people for experiments. They harvest our biological materials for their technology. Our neural tissue is used to create their computers. Our skin is processed to power their ship systems." Amy Foster, one of the Marines, stepped closer to the images. "That's not conquest, that's farming. They're treating your people like livestock." The Elder nodded sadly. "We tried to reason with them, but they do not respond to communication. We offered them our knowledge, our art, our healing techniques. They ignored everything and continued, harvesting our colonies." Danny Murphy studied the tactical displays. "Elder, what kind of defenses do your people have?" "We have energy shields that can protect our cities from natural disasters. We have sensors that can detect approaching ships from great distances. But we have no weapons. We have never needed them." Ryan looked at the images of Vorthan ships attacking helpless Zephyrian colonies. "How many worlds have they taken?" 12 so far. They are moving toward our core systems. At their current pace, they will reach our homeworld in 3 of your months." Lisa watched the recordings with growing horror. The Vorthans seemed to treat the Zephyrians the way humans might treat cattle or sheep. There was no emotion, no communication, just efficient harvesting of biological resources. "Elder Catharai," she said, "you called us warriors from a death world. What do you know about Earth and humanity?" The alien's skin shifted to lighter, blue patterns. Our deep space sensors have observed your world for many years. We know that your planet experiences violent storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages. We know that your species evolved through constant competition and conflict. We have observed your wars and your struggles to survive in harsh conditions. And you think that makes us good at fighting? We think it makes you capable of actions that we cannot even imagine. We hope it makes you able to stop the Vorthans from destroying us. Ryan looked around at his team. The humans were all thinking the same thing. These peaceful aliens had no concept of warfare, no understanding of tactics or strategy. They were asking Earth to fight a war they could not even comprehend. Elder, Ryan said, we'll need to see more information about Vorthan capabilities. We need to understand their technology, their tactics, and their goals. We will provide everything we have. But Captain Torres, you must understand. We are not asking you to fight alongside us. We are asking you to fight instead of us. We cannot bear violence. We cannot harm other beings, even to save ourselves. Danny Murphy looked at Ryan with raised eyebrows. They had come to help allies in a war, but instead they had found a species that wanted them to fight their battles for them. We'll do what we can, Ryan said. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're up against. Lieutenant Kate Barnes crouched behind a twisted metal beam, watching the Vorthan facility through her binoculars. The building looked like it was alive, with walls that pulsed and moved like breathing flesh. Strange lights flickered under its surface, and the air around it shimmered with energy fields. Kate had volunteered to lead the reconnaissance mission, to gather intelligence on Vorthan operations. Her team included 3 other specialists: Corporal Jim Walsh, an explosives expert, Sergeant Linda Cruz, a communications specialist, and Private Tony Kim, their medic. They had been hiding in the ruins of a Zephyrian research station for 6 hours studying the enemy facility. Kate, look at this, whispered Jim, pointing to his scanner. The building is giving off biological readings. It's not made of metal or stone. It's actually alive. Kate adjusted her binoculars and focused on the facility's entrance. Vorthan soldiers were moving in and out, carrying containers that glowed with soft blue light. The soldiers looked like giant insects, with hard, black shells covering their bodies and 4 arms instead of 2. They moved in perfect coordination like parts of a machine. Linda, are you picking up any communications? Kate asked. Linda shook her head, listening to her radio equipment. Nothing on normal frequencies, but there's some kind of low-frequency signal connecting all the Vorthans. It's like they're sharing one brain. Through her binoculars, Kate watched as a group of Vorthans brought out a container filled with what looked like pieces of Zephyrian tissue. The blue glow was getting brighter, and she realized with horror that the tissue was still alive. Tony, you need to see this, she said, handing him the binoculars. Tony looked through the lenses, and his face went pale. They're not just killing the Zephyrians. They're keeping parts of them alive and using them like biological computers. The team continued watching as more Vorthans emerged from the facility. Some carried containers of glowing tissue, while others loaded equipment that seemed to be grown rather than built. Everything the Vorthans used appeared to be alive in some way. Kate made a decision. We need to get inside that building. We need to see what they're really doing to the Zephyrians. Jim looked at her with concern. Kate, that place is probably full of guards, and we don't know what kind of defenses they have. The Zephyrians gave us their stealth technology. If we're careful, we can get in and out without being detected. The Zephyrian stealth device was a small crystal that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. It was not perfect, but it worked well enough to hide them from most sensors. Kate activated the device and felt the strange tingling sensation as the energy field covered her team. They moved slowly toward the Vorthan facility, staying low and avoiding the patrol routes they had observed. The building's walls felt warm and slightly wet, like touching a living animal. Kate found an opening that looked like a wound in the structure's side. Inside, the facility was even more disturbing than the outside. The walls pulsed with veins full of glowing liquid. The floor felt soft and spongy under their feet, Everything was organic, alive, and wrong. They moved through corridors that twisted and curved like the inside of a body. Strange sounds echoed around them, breathing, heartbeats, and soft moaning that might have been voices. Kate tried not to think about what they were walking through. In the central chamber, they found what they were looking for. Hundreds of containers lined the walls, each one filled with pieces of Zephyrian tissue suspended in glowing liquid. Some containers held neural tissue that sparked with electrical activity. Others contained skin that continued to produce the bioluminescent chemicals the Zephyrians used for communication. "Jesus Christ," whispered Tony. "They're keeping them alive and conscious. Those neural tissues are still thinking." Kate felt sick, but she forced herself to document everything with her camera. The Vorthons were not just harvesting the Zephyrians. They were torturing them by keeping parts of their bodies alive and aware after separation. In the center of the chamber stood a massive creature that could only be a Vorthon commander. It was twice the size of the soldier drones, with additional arms and complex patterns on its shell. Unlike the others, this one seemed to have individual personality and intelligence. Linda pointed to her communication device. "Kate, that big one is the source of the control signal. It's directing all the others." The commander was examining a container of Zephyrian neural tissue, making notes on a device that looked like it was grown from the same material as the building. Kate realized that this creature was War Commander Zextar, the leader mentioned, in intercepted Vorthon communications. As they watched, Zextar connected the neural tissue to a complex biological computer system. The tissue began glowing brighter, and Kate could see electrical patterns flowing through it like thoughts. The Vorthons were using living Zephyrian brains to run their technology. "We need to get out of here," Kate whispered. "We have enough information." But as they turned to leave, one of the containers began making sounds, musical notes that Kate recognized as Zephyrian communication. The neural tissue inside was trying to talk. Tony moved closer to the container, his medical training overriding his fear. "It's asking for help. The consciousness is still intact inside that tissue." Kate grabbed his arm. "We can't help it now. We need to get this information back to Captain Torres." They made their way back through the organic corridors, past the pulsing walls and breathing floors. The facility seemed to sense their presence now. With walls contracting and passages shifting, the building was trying to trap them. Jim used a small explosive charge to blast open a wall, creating a new exit. They ran from the facility as alarms began sounding. Not mechanical sirens, but organic screams from the building itself. Back at their hidden position, Kate transmitted their findings to the Resilience. Captain Torres's voice came through the radio, tight with anger and disgust. "Lieutenant, you're telling me the Vorthons are using living Zephyrian brains as computer components?" "Yes, sir. And keeping them conscious during the process. This isn't just conquest or even genocide. It's systematic torture on an industrial scale." There was a long pause before Torres responded. "Get back to the ship immediately. We need to share this information with the Zephyrians and figure out how to fight these things." During the flight back to the Resilience, Kate studied the images she had captured. The Vorthons were not just another aggressive species fighting for resources or territory. They were something much worse. Beings that treated other intelligent life as raw materials for their technology. "Kate," said Tony, "how do we fight something like this? They're using living buildings, organic computers, and biological weapons. Nothing in our military training prepared us for this." Kate looked out at the stars, thinking about the containers full of tortured Zephyrian consciousness. "We figure it out, because if we don't stop them here, they'll do the same thing to every other species they encounter, including us." When they reached the Resilience, Kate briefed Captain Torres and Dr. Hamilton on what they had discovered. The room fell silent as she showed them the images of the biological facility and explained how the Vorthons were keeping Zephyrian neural tissue alive and conscious. Dr. Hamilton looked sick. "This changes everything. We're not just fighting to protect the Zephyrians. We're fighting to stop something that treats consciousness itself as a commodity." Torres studied the tactical data Kate had gathered. The good news is that their biological technology might have weaknesses that mechanical systems don't have. If we can disrupt their life support systems or poison their organic components, we might be able to level the playing field. Kate nodded. Sir, there's something else. The big commander Zextar seemed to be controlling all the others through some kind of mental link. If we could disrupt that connection, the regular soldiers might become helpless. Then that's our target, Torres said. We find a way to cut off their hive mind and turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. As Kate prepared her full report, she thought about the Zephyrian neural tissue that had tried to communicate with them. Somewhere in that facility, pieces of conscious beings were trapped in containers, aware but unable to escape. The humans had to find a way to stop the Vorthons, not just to save the Zephyrians, but to prevent this horror from spreading to other worlds. War Commander Zextar stood in the center of his bioship's command chamber, studying reports from his subordinates. The facility raid by the unknown species had disrupted several harvesting operations, and he was not pleased. His shell patterns shifted to dark red, a sign of anger among his kind. The new species called themselves humans, and they came from a planet designated as unsuitable for life by Vorthon standards. Zextar had accessed the collective memory banks and found scattered references to worlds like Earth, planets with unstable weather, geological activity, and dangerous predators. Most species that evolved on such worlds died out quickly or never developed beyond primitive levels. But these humans were different. They had developed space travel, weapons technology, and worst of all, they seemed capable of independent thought even when separated from their group. This was deeply disturbing to Zextar, whose entire understanding of intelligence was based on collective consciousness. Sub-Commander Vexhai, Zextar called to one of his subordinates, report on the human capabilities. Vexhai's shell turned blue, indicating submission and attention. War Commander, the humans use crude mechanical technology instead of biological systems. Their weapons fire metal projectiles and chemical explosives. Their ships are powered by controlled nuclear reactions. However, they demonstrate unexpected tactical flexibility. Zextar examined the tactical data from recent encounters. In 3 separate battles, human forces had used completely different strategies. When Vorthon bioships adapted to counter one approach, the humans immediately switched to something else entirely. This should have been impossible for a species with limited collective intelligence. How many humans are in this system? Zextar asked. Fewer than 200, War Commander. 1 ship, with support vessels. But they have disrupted operations on 6 worlds and destroyed 12 harvesting facilities. This was unacceptable. A force of less than 200 primitives was interfering with an operation that involved thousands of Vorthon bioships and millions of harvesting drones. Zextar decided it was time to study these humans more carefully. Meanwhile, aboard the Resilience, Captain Torres was developing new tactics with his expanded team. Earth had sent reinforcements after receiving his reports about the Vorthon threat. The new arrivals included fighter pilot Nick Coleman, marine demolitions expert Carlos Ruiz, and 50 additional soldiers and technicians. The problem, Torres explained to his senior staff, is that we're fighting an enemy that thinks completely differently than we do. They expect logical, predictable responses, but humans don't always act logically. Nick Coleman studied the flight patterns of Vorthon bioships. Captain, their ships move like flocks of birds. They maintain formation and react as a group. But that means if we can confuse their formation, individual ships become vulnerable. Carlos Ruiz had been working with Zephyrian scientist Velnari to understand Vorthon technology. Sir, we've discovered that their bioships need specific nutrients to maintain their living systems. They have to return to supply bases every few weeks to feed. Dr. Hamilton added her own findings. The Vorthons seem unable to understand individual decision-making. When we captured some of their soldiers, they became almost catatonic when separated from their command network. They literally can't function as individuals. Torres looked at the tactical display showing Vorthon fleet movements. Then we use that against them. We fight like humans, not like an organized military force. We improvise, adapt, and make decisions they can't predict. The first test of this new approach came during the Battle of Crystal Spires, the main city on the second Zephyrian world. Vorthon forces had surrounded the city and were preparing to begin harvesting operations. Elder Ketharai had reluctantly agreed to evacuate the population, but the process would take days. Sergeant Murphy had been training a group of Zephyrian volunteers in basic defensive tactics. The aliens couldn't bring themselves to use actual weapons, but they could operate shield generators and sensor arrays. Murphy had learned to work with their limitations rather than fight against them. Remember, Murphy told his mixed team of humans and Zephyrians, you don't have to kill anyone. Just keep the shields up and tell us where the enemies are. We'll handle the rest. The Vorthon attack began at dawn. Bioships descended toward the Crystal City like living meteors, their organic hulls glowing with energy buildup. They moved, in perfect formation, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be. Torres split his small fleet into individual units, each operating independently. Nick Coleman led 3 fighters in a diving attack from the sun's direction, while Kate Barnes took 2 ships around the planet's far side. Carlos Ruiz positioned himself near the asteroid belt, ready to spring an ambush. The Vorthon formation responded to Coleman's attack by shifting to intercept him. But instead of engaging, Coleman's fighters scattered in different directions, each pilot making independent decisions about where to go next. The bioships tried to follow, but their collective coordination became confused when faced with 3 targets moving in unpredictable patterns. While the Vorthons were distracted, Barnes emerged from behind the planet and attacked their supply ships. Her small force destroyed 2 bioships before the enemy could react. By the time the Vorthons turned to face this new threat, Ruiz launched his attack from the asteroid belt. On the planet's surface, Murphy's mixed human Zephyrian teams used guerrilla tactics to defend key positions. When Vorthon ground forces landed, they found enemies who didn't follow any recognizable battle plan. Human soldiers would attack, withdraw, circle around, and attack again from completely different positions. The Zephyrians proved surprisingly effective at their support role. Their advanced sensors could track Vorthon movements through walls and underground tunnels. Their shield technology, powered by human fusion reactors, was stronger than anything the Vorthons had encountered before. Elder Ketharai, monitoring the battle from the evacuation site, watched human and Zephyrian forces working together with amazement. Dr. Hamilton, your people fight like individual warriors, but they also work as a team. How is this possible? It's called trust, Hamilton replied. Each human knows that the others will do their jobs, so they're free to adapt and improvise. We don't need a hive mind because we choose to cooperate. The battle raged for 18 hours. The Vorthons, despite superior numbers and technology, found themselves unable to predict human tactics. Every time they adapted to one strategy, the humans switched to something completely different. War Commander Jextar, watching from his command ship, felt something he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. The humans were violating every principle of organized warfare. They made decisions that seemed random, took risks that seemed suicidal, and somehow succeeded through methods that defied logical analysis. Sub-Commander, he said, access the collective memory for information about Deathworld species. I need to understand how these humans think. The data that came back was disturbing. Deathworld species evolved under constant pressure from their environment. They developed the ability to make rapid decisions with incomplete information. They learned to take calculated risks because playing it safe meant death. Most importantly, they evolved individual intelligence because group coordination was often impossible in chaotic conditions. Jexthar realized that the Vorthons had never faced an enemy like this before. Every species they had conquered thought, collectively, used predictable tactics and could be defeated through superior coordination. But humans were evolved chaos agents, creatures who thrived on unpredictability. The Battle of Crystal Spires ended with Vorthon forces withdrawing from the planet. They had failed to capture a single Zephyrian, lost multiple bioships, and gained no useful intelligence about human capabilities. For the first time in Vorthon military history, a smaller force had defeated a larger one through pure tactical superiority. Torres stood in the Crystal City, watching Zephyrian children playing in the streets that had been under attack just hours before. Murphy was teaching a group of young Zephyrians how to use basic communication equipment, while Hamilton worked with Elder Ketharai to plan the next phase of operations. "Captain," said Nick Coleman, "the Vorthans are regrouping. They're bringing in more ships and changing their approach." Torres nodded. "Then we change ours too. That's what humans do best. We adapt faster than our enemies can plan." As the sun set over the Crystal City, Torres knew that the real war was just beginning. The Vorthans would learn from this defeat and modify their tactics. But humans had been fighting wars of adaptation for thousands of years. It was what they were best at, and now they had allies who brought their own strengths to the fight. The Deathworlders had proven they could win battles. Now they had to prove they could win a war. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the newly arrived Earth battleship UES Guardian, watching 3 more human ships emerge from faster-than-light travel. The fleet now included 4 warships, 6 support vessels, and 200 additional personnel. Earth had committed serious resources to the war against the Vorthans. Captain Torres joined Admiral Blake on the Guardian's bridge, looking tired but determined. The past month had been filled with constant skirmishes as Vorthan forces tested human defenses around key Zephyrian worlds. "Admiral, the situation has changed significantly since our last report to Earth," Torres said. "The Vorthans are adapting to our tactics faster than we expected. They're bringing in specialized bioships designed specifically to counter human unpredictability." Blake studied the tactical displays showing current fleet positions. "What kind of adaptations are we seeing?" "They've developed hunter-killer ships that operate independently from the main hive mind. These ships can make individual decisions and respond to our improvised tactics. They're also using psychological warfare, broadcasting recordings of tortured Zephyrian consciousness to demoralize our alien allies." Dr. Hamilton entered the bridge carrying a data tablet with her latest research findings. "Admiral, I've been working with Zephyrian scientist Ithvox on a crucial discovery. We found a critical weakness in Vorthan biotechnology." She activated the main display screen, showing molecular diagrams of Vorthan ship components. Their living ships require specific mineral compounds to maintain their biological systems. These compounds are only found on certain types of planets with particular geological conditions. Blake examined the data carefully. "You're saying their ships will die without these minerals?" "Exactly. Think of it like vitamins for humans. Without the right nutrients, Vorthan bioships begin to deteriorate. Their weapons lose power, their hulls become brittle, and their computer systems start failing." Torres pointed to the star chart. "We've identified the Vorthan supply system. They have mining operations on 12 worlds within 50 light-years of here. If we can disrupt those operations, their entire fleet will start breaking down." "Admiral," Blake nodded slowly. "How long before their ships become combat ineffective?" "According to Ithvox's calculations, about 6 weeks without proper nutrients," Hamilton replied. "But there's a problem. These mining worlds are heavily defended, and they're spread across multiple star systems. We don't have enough ships to attack all of them simultaneously." Blake turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mitchell. "Colonel, what's your assessment of a multi-system strike operation?" Mitchell had been studying the data for weeks. "Admiral, it's possible, but extremely risky. We'd have to split our forces and coordinate attacks across vast distances. If the Vorthans realize what we're doing, they could concentrate their defenses and destroy our scattered fleets. But if we succeed," Torres added, "we could end this war without having to fight thousands of Vorthan bioships in direct combat." Blake considered the options. The human fleet was growing stronger, but the Vorthans still had massive numerical superiority. A conventional war would result in enormous casualties on both sides, and there was no guarantee that Earth could continue sending reinforcements indefinitely. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, Elder Ketharai was experiencing something unprecedented in his species' history. For the first time in 50,000 years, Zephyrians were learning to think about violence as a necessary tool for survival. Sergeant Murphy had been working with a group of young Zephyrians who had volunteered to support human operations. They couldn't bring themselves to use weapons, but they had developed other skills that proved valuable in warfare. "Elder," said Velnari, one of the volunteers. Watching the humans fight has changed how we think about protecting our people. We still cannot harm others directly, but we can use our abilities to help those who can. Ketharai's skin shifted to deep blue patterns of contemplation. This troubles me, young one. Are we becoming something we were never meant to be? Perhaps, Velnari replied. But the humans have shown us that sometimes change is necessary for survival. They call it adaptation. Dr. Hamilton had spent considerable time studying Zephyrian society and psychology. She found their evolution fascinating and disturbing at the same time. The Zephyrians had achieved perfect peace by eliminating their capacity for violence, but this also left them helpless against species that had not made the same choice. Elder Ketharai, Hamilton said during one of their regular meetings, your people have developed incredible healing abilities and advanced technology precisely because you never had to waste resources on warfare. But now you're facing enemies who see your peaceful nature as weakness. The elder's pattern shifted to pale yellow, indicating uncertainty. Dr. Hamilton, your species evolved on a world of constant danger. You learned to fight because you had no choice. But fighting changed you. Will helping you fight change us as well? Hamilton considered the question carefully. Probably, yes. But change isn't always bad. Humans learn to cooperate and build peaceful societies despite our violent origins. Maybe Zephyrians can learn to defend themselves while keeping their essential nature. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Guardian. Admiral Blake's voice came through the comm system with news that would change everything. All senior staff report to the command center immediately. We've received intelligence about a major Vorthan offensive. At the command center, Blake briefed the assembled leaders on the latest intelligence. Lieutenant Kate Barnes had led another reconnaissance mission and discovered that War Commander Zextar was planning a massive assault on the Zephyrian homeworld. The attack will come in 2 weeks, Blake explained. The Vorthans are bringing their entire reserve fleet, over 300 bioships. They plan to harvest the entire population of the homeworld in a single operation. Torres studied the I2O tactical projections. Admiral, we can't possibly defend against that many ships with our current forces. No, Blake agreed, but we can use their offensive as an opportunity. While Zextar concentrates his forces here, their mining operations will be lightly defended. If we strike the supply worlds while their main fleet is committed to the assault, we can cripple their entire war machine. Colonel Mitchell outlined the strike plan. We'll use fast attack ships to hit all 12 mining worlds simultaneously. The operations will have to be perfectly timed. If even one supply world survives, the Vorthans can keep their fleet operational long enough to complete the harvest. Elder Ketharai listened to the human plans with growing amazement. You are proposing to sacrifice your defensive position to attack distant targets. This seems extremely dangerous. It is, admitted Blake. But sometimes the most dangerous option is also the only one that can succeed. Dr. Hamilton added, Elder, this is how humans think about warfare. We don't just react to enemy moves. We try to change the entire situation to our advantage. The planning session continued for hours, as human officers and Zephyrian scientists worked together to prepare for the most ambitious military operation in either species' history. They would have to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems while simultaneously defending against the largest Vorthan fleet ever assembled. Sergeant Murphy approached Admiral Blake with a request that surprised everyone. Ma'am, I'd like permission to train Zephyrian volunteers for combat support roles during the defense. Blake raised an eyebrow. Sergeant, the Zephyrians can't use weapons. No, ma'am, but they can operate shield generators, sensor arrays, and communication systems. During the battle, we'll need every advantage we can get. The Zephyrians want to help defend their own world. Elder Ketharai stepped forward. Admiral Blake, my people have decided we cannot fight, but we can support those who fight for us. We will not hide while others risk their lives to save ours. Blake looked around the room at the faces of humans and Zephyrians working together. Very well. Colonel Mitchell, include Zephyrian support teams in your defensive plans. Dr. Hamilton, continue working with their scientists to maximize our technological advantages. As the meeting ended, Blake remained in the command center, staring at the tactical displays. In 2 weeks, humanity would face its greatest test. They would have to fight the largest space battle in human history, while simultaneously conducting complex operations across multiple star systems. The stakes could not be higher. If they failed, the Zephyrians would be harvested, and humanity would face the Vorthon Empire alone. But if they succeeded, they might end the war and prove that Deathworlders could do more than just survive. They could inspire others to become stronger than they ever thought possible. Captain Torres joined Blake at the display. "Admiral, do you think we can actually pull this off?" Blake smiled grimly. "Captain, humans have been doing impossible things since we first walked out of Africa and spread across a planet that was trying to kill us. This is just the next step in that journey." The massive Vorthon fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrian home system, like a swarm of living nightmares. 300 bioships, each one pulsing with organic energy, began their approach toward the crystal, cities below. War Commander Jextar had brought everything for this final assault. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of the Guardian, watching the enemy fleet spread across her tactical displays. The human defensive force looked pitifully small in comparison, 12 ships against 300. But appearance could be deceiving, especially when humans were involved. "Admiral," reported Colonel Mitchell, "all strike teams have reached their target systems. They're waiting for your signal to begin the supply world attacks." Blake nodded, checking the countdown timer. Everything depended on perfect timing. The strike teams had to hit all 12 mining worlds simultaneously, exactly 30 minutes, after the main Vorthon fleet committed to the assault on the homeworld. Captain Torres coordinated the defense from his position near the planet's largest moon. His mixed fleet of human ships and Zephyrian support vessels had been positioned to look like a desperate last stand. The Vorthons needed to believe they were facing a conventional defensive battle. "All ships, remember the plan," Torres broadcast on the tactical frequency. "We hold position until the enemy is fully committed. No one breaks formation until Admiral Blake gives the signal." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Murphy watched through his binoculars as Vorthon troop transports began entering the atmosphere. Beside him, Velnari operated a Zephyrian sensor array that could track enemy movements through the Crystal City's complex structure. "Sergeant," said Velnari, his skin patterns showing nervous excitement, "the Vorthon ground forces are larger than we expected. They're bringing harvesting equipment for the entire population." Murphy checked his weapon and looked at the mixed team of humans and Zephyrians under his command. "Then we make sure they don't get to use it. Remember, you handle the shields and sensors. We'll handle everything else." Elder Ketharai stood in the city's central command chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. For the first time in his long life, he was directly involved in planning violence against other beings. Sci. Experience was deeply disturbing but absolutely necessary. "Dr. Hamilton," he said, "are you certain this plan will work?" Hamilton checked her data tablet, reviewing the calculations one more time. "Elder, if our strike teams can destroy the mining operations before the Vorthon fleet realizes what's happening, their bioships will start failing within hours. But if even one supply world survives, they can keep fighting for weeks." The first phase of the battle began as Vorthon bioships opened fire on the human defensive positions. Energy beams and living projectiles filled space between the fleets. The human ships responded with conventional weapons, missiles, railguns, and particle beams that seemed primitive compared to Vorthon biotechnology. Jextar watched the battle from his command ship, feeling confident that his overwhelming numerical advantage would ensure victory. The humans fought well, but they were clearly outnumbered and outgunned. Within hours, the resistance would collapse and the harvesting could begin. But 30 minutes into the battle, something unexpected happened. Admiral Blake received confirmation signals from all 12 strike teams, Lieutenant Kate Barnes leading. The operation against the primary mining world reported complete success. "Admiral, all mineral processing facilities are destroyed. The Vorthons never saw us coming." Similar reports came in from the other 11 systems. Colonel Mitchell's coordination had worked perfectly. While the main Vorthan fleet was focused on the homeworld assault, their supply infrastructure had been systematically eliminated. All strike teams, return to base immediately, Blake ordered. Phase 2 begins now. The effects of the supply disruption were not immediately visible, but Dr. Hamilton's sensors began detecting subtle changes in Vorthan bioship performance. Energy output was decreasing, hull integrity was starting to degrade, and their biological computer systems were becoming less responsive. Jextar noticed the changes first in his smaller scout ships. Their movements became sluggish, their weapons lost precision, and their communication with the hive mind became unstable. At first he assumed it was battle damage, but the pattern was too widespread and systematic. Sub-Commander Vexahai, he called, run diagnostics on all bioship systems. Something is wrong. The diagnosis was devastating. Without the essential minerals from their supply worlds, the entire Vorthan fleet was slowly dying. Their living ships were essentially starving, and there was no way to reverse the process without returning to the mining worlds. But when Jextar tried to send ships back to check on the supply operations, he discovered that the mining worlds were gone. Every single facility had been destroyed in perfectly coordinated attacks. The humans had somehow struck across multiple star systems while fighting a defensive battle at the same time. For the first time in his military career, Jextar felt something approaching panic. His massive fleet was trapped in a dying spiral, and the humans had orchestrated the entire situation from the beginning. War Commander, reported Vexahai. Bioship efficiency is down to 60% and falling. We estimate complete system failure within 6 hours. Torres watched the Vorthan fleet's movements becoming increasingly erratic as their ships began failing. Admiral, enemy formation is breaking down. Their coordination is falling apart. All ships begin the counterattack, Blake ordered. Target the command vessels first, let's finish this. The final phase of the battle was unlike anything either species had ever seen. Human ships, small and fast, darted between the massive but weakening Vorthan bioships. The aliens tried to maintain formation, but their hive mind was breaking down as individual ships lost power and communication. On the planet's surface, Murphy's team held their defensive positions as Vorthan ground forces became increasingly disorganized. The alien soldiers cut off from their command network seemed confused and directionless. Velnari, Murphy called. Can you track the enemy commander? The young Zephyrian's skin flashed with concentration as he operated his sensors. Yes, Sergeant. The large Vorthan is in the central plaza, but it appears to be malfunctioning. Murphy's team moved through the Crystal City, using Zephyrian shield technology to protect themselves from Vorthan weapons. When they reached the plaza, they found the enemy commander standing motionless, disconnected from its dying fleet above. The space battle ended not with a massive explosion, but with a gradual collapse. Jextar's command ship, its biological systems failing, drifted helplessly as human forces surrounded it. The war commander himself, experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in his life, found the sensation overwhelming and terrifying. Admiral Blake opened a communication channel to the Vorthan flagship. War Commander Jextar, your fleet is defeated and your soldiers are surrendering. Will you accept our terms for ending this war? The reply came slowly, in broken translation. Humans of the Death World, how did you achieve this victory? Your ships are few. Your weapons are primitive, yet you have destroyed our empire. Blake smiled. We didn't destroy your empire, Commander. We convinced it to destroy itself. That's what happens when you fight people who learn to survive by thinking differently. In the aftermath of the battle, Elder Ketharai stood in his Crystal City, watching human and Zephyrian teams working together to repair the damage. The war was over, but both species had been changed by the experience. Dr. Hamilton, the Elder said, your people came here as warriors, but you have given us something more valuable than military victory. You have shown us that it is possible to fight for peace, to use strength to protect rather than conquer. Hamilton looked up at the stars where the combined human Zephyrian fleet was establishing new defensive positions. Elder, when we received your distress call, we thought you were asking for soldiers, But what you really needed was hope. Hope that someone would stand with you. Hope that cooperation could triumph over conquest. Captain Torres, newly promoted to Admiral of the Deep Space Defense Force, joined their conversation. The Vorthons will recover eventually, but they'll remember this defeat, and word will spread to other species that there's an alternative to submission or destruction. Elder Ketharai's skin shifted to the warm golden patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. When we sent our message asking for help from Deathworlders, we expected you to send us killers and destroyers. Instead, you sent us teachers and protectors. You have shown us that true strength comes not from the ability to harm others, but from the courage to inspire them to become more than they thought possible. As the sun set over the Crystal City, representatives from both species worked together to draft the charter for the Human-Zephyrian Alliance. It would be the first of many such partnerships as word spread through the galaxy that there was now a place where species could find protection without surrendering their freedom. The message was clear across the stars. Earth had sent its Deathworlders, but what the galaxy received was something far more dangerous to tyrants and conquerors everywhere.